Great day so far. A lot of energy in the room. Man, and I really believe that last song. Thank you to our worship team for leading us to recognize that God is up to something right now. And I imagine that there are lots of us in the room who are grateful and learning to live with gratitude about the good things that God is doing in our lives in spite of the chaos that's happening around us. But if there's something that you are asking God to do today, if there's something that you are desperate for Him to accomplish in your life today, then I want you to consider this, what we read here in Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to be walking through this passage today as a sample of what our children and our students are talking through in the month of August. We are making our way through the book of Genesis in the month of August, and kind of tracing out this theme of faith from beginning to the end of that book. In fact, our children and even our students to a degree will be walking through the entire Bible over the course of this year together in our family ministry. And I want to invite you also back to church on the 20th on a Wednesday evening for family night. And many of you know, for the last couple of years, we've had a family dinner here at Sweetwater where we just get together and we fellowship, and then we go our separate ways. And some of us will go, some of you go to a Bible study with Pastor Buddy, which, by the way, last week was amazing. I watched the whole thing this morning. Very good introduction to the book of Job. Highly encourage that on Wednesday evenings. And then some of us would break off and go to student ministry or children's ministry. And so moving forward, what we're going to do is on this family night, we're going to share a meal together, and then we're just going to stick together. And we want to have this intergenerational experience where we as a church family talk about the theme that our kids are talking through in that particular month. And so again, on the 20th, when we gather for a family dinner, we will have an activity together and just kind of give an overview of what God is calling us to live out together as a family, as a community. So today, in order to kind of get a handle on the book of Genesis, I want us to start in the book of Hebrews chapter 11. Because the first 22 verses of Hebrews 11 really walks through the story of Genesis and traces out this theme of faith. So let's read this together, and then we'll pray. And here's what we read there. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. And I'll just, on the outset, say that this is a very popular verse. Maybe you know it by heart, and there's lots of different ways to translate that. Maybe you have a different way of remembering this verse. Something like faith is the substance of what we hope for. It's the evidence of things we do not see. We'll talk about those differences this morning. Now, this is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. And by faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offering. And by faith, Abel's blood, or Abel, still speaks even though he is dead. And by faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And listen to this, friends, without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and rewards those who earnestly seek him. In fact, that's what we see in the book of Genesis. And I want to trace that out just a little bit this morning. Before we go any further, let's pray and ask that God would help us to see as a community what he is leading us into by his Spirit. Our Father in heaven, you are good and faithful, though we are faithless, as Paul says to his servant, to his friend Timothy. That we get lost and confused, but you haven't given up on us, and you won't give up on us. And the testimony of your faithfulness is in your Son, Jesus Christ, who we were singing about this morning. You sent him to us that we might have life. You sent him that he might die in our place. You sent him that he might rise again to prove that what he accomplished there was true and that you are faithful to accomplish everything that you set out to do from the beginning. And so we're learning to trust your faithfulness with our response of faith. God, help us to see this morning that you've always been inviting us to join you in what you desire to do in the world, and that our response would be one in which we trust you and your goodness and your kindness and your mercy and your justice. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. So my wife and I have, as of this past week, been married for 25 years, and I think that's something to celebrate. For her and I, it definitely is a milestone. Not only a milestone, it is a reminder of the times that God has brought us through, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in just a little bit. We've changed over the years. The dynamics of our relationship has changed, and one of the ways that it's changed is that my wife now likes going to the movies. We've gone to the movies before, but it was always something I really enjoyed to do, and she would put up with. But recently, she has found that it's just really nice sometimes in the middle of the week to get out of the house now that the kids can do their own thing and just sit in a quiet room and stare at a screen and not have to think about anything and eat some popcorn and some candy. And so we enjoy date nights at the movies. And recently, we went to see the latest Superman movie, the James Gunn directed new reboot of Superman. The reviews are in. Some people think it's better than Man of Steel. Some people think Man of Steel is the best ever done, and some people just can't get away from the original. I enjoy the movie. It was really good. And obviously, you might have noticed that one of the motifs for this series that we're doing with our kids this month is about superheroes, and every superhero has an origin story. This movie is all about Superman's origin story. In fact, you see the subtitle here is It Begins. How did it begin? In fact, the movie just kind of jumps into the middle of a scene in which Superman is saving people like he always does, and never really gets into how did he receive his powers, his superpowers, how did he become super. Really, the question is not so much about how did he get his superpowers, that's just kind of assumed. The question is, why is he here? Like, what's his motive? What was he sent to do? And I can't think of a better parallel as we consider what God is inviting us to do as his people who walk by faith than a movie like this. In fact, there's this moment in the movie where I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but there's lots of questions about Superman. Can he really be trusted? Is he really here to help humanity, or is he here to take advantage of humanity? And I think that in the book of Genesis, it's very easy to get lost and confused about the character of God and the character of the people that he chooses. Very often it seems like God is saying to humanity, you're not good enough, and he only chooses people who are good enough. And in fact, I think that's a misreading of the book of Genesis and this theme that we read throughout the book of Genesis, that what God is really looking for is not so much people who are perfect. He's not looking for people who always make the right choice. He's looking for people who will trust him enough to do what he says is good and right and beautiful, that will understand that he created this world with intentionality, and that he has planned something good for it, and when everything is going awry and when there's chaos, that he is looking for people who will trust him to join him in his mission to bring about redemption and restoration. So I would just say this, like, here's the way that I understand the book of Genesis as I've been reflecting on it over the course of this week, and this idea of faith and these characters that we read about in the book of Hebrews and that we're reading about in the book of Genesis. It's that from the very beginning, from the beginning of the book of Genesis all the way to the end of the Bible in the book of Revelation, from the very beginning, faith has always been about the way ordinary heroes of faith say yes to God's invitation and step into his mission. So if you're reading through the book of Hebrews, you come to chapter 11, and there's this great chapter 11, which is kind of like a transition from the idea that the people in the Roman world at the time when this letter is written, we don't know when it was written exactly or who wrote it exactly, but we know that it's written to Jewish believers in the Roman world, and they're struggling to continue to walk by faith. They are beginning to wonder if this thing that they've committed their lives to is real. They're starting to wonder, is it worth it? And so at the end of chapter 10, the writer says, you need to persevere. Don't give up. Continue walking by faith even though things are hard and confusing, so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For there's this quotation in the Old Testament, in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. And also in the book of Habakkuk, my righteous one will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. But listen, friends, we are not those who shrink back. This is an encouraging word. We are those who walk by faith. We are those who have faith and are saved. Now, what is faith? Well, let's talk about it for a minute. It's the next verse. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. In other words, as you read through the book of Genesis, the people that God partners with, the people that God invites into this mission, these great heroes of faith were those who were confident in about the hope that they had in something that they could not see. God was inviting them to something that they couldn't fully understand. So let's unpack some of these words just a little bit. Big one for my students here at Sweetwater. They talk about this a lot in their own circle. What does it mean to have faith? What does it really mean to put your faith in God or to put your faith in Jesus? Biblically speaking, it's not just about what you think in your head. It's about the quality of your life. This word can be translated a couple different ways. It can be translated and is translated in your English Bibles sometimes not only as faith but trust or belief. And trust really does capture the heart of it. It's like a confidence that I have in what God is inviting me to, in what God says, such that I'm willing to take action on it because I trust Him. It's more than just something you think in your head. And so this faith, this trust in God, is a confidence in what He is saying and what He is calling us to, that even though we can't see what the outcome is going to be, even though we can't fully comprehend what He's up to, we're willing to take action. We're willing to step into it. And we have this assurance about it. So this word confidence is really interesting. It's often, like I said, translated in some of your Bibles as the substance of things hoped for, which is not so much to say like it's the heart of the thing that you hope for, as much as it is to say like it's the foundation, the solid support underneath the thing that you hope. Like that's why it's translated confidence, because it's like it's a solid thing that you have about the hope that God is calling you to. So it's the substance or the guarantee of what is hoped for. It's the foundation that makes our hope certain. And faith is confidence or the substance of those things that we hope for, and it's the assurance of things that we cannot see. And so that word assurance is like, it's sometimes translated as the evidence of the thing you can't see. And when I was in Bible college, I remember very clearly in an apologetics class being told that the faith that we have is not a blind faith. There is evidence that God can be trusted, and so we want to consider that evidence as we step into the thing that we cannot quite know. And so it's the proof. It's this inner persuasion that the thing that we can't quite see yet is true, and it's real, and we can step into it. I would say that like faith in this way it's not blind. We're not being called to simply blind faith, but we can't always quite see where the story is going or what God is calling us into. We can't understand the full picture. There's always an element of the unknown when we're being called to do something in faith, and that is the nature of trusting God, whose ways are not something that we can comprehend. God says, my thoughts are above your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. And the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans at the end of chapter 11 says, who's ever known the mind of God? You can't quite comprehend all the things that God desires to do. And so He's always inviting us into something that we can't quite see clearly. But Corrie ten Boom said it best. She says that faith isn't blind. It sees the unseen. In other words, I begin to perceive the thing that no one around me can quite see. Even though it's fuzzy, I see that God is inviting me into something. Now, faith is this confidence about what we hope for. Something that's unseen, but we have some assurance about. And that's what we're reading about in the book of Genesis. These ancients who were described by God as being blameless or righteous or being called to be His partner in the world, they were commended for their faith. So this theme of faith is very important in Scripture. You know that. And I just kind of hold these couple verses up as goalposts for myself when I think about what faith is or why it's significant. One of them that we read just now in Hebrews 11:6 is like, has like a negative aspect to it. Like if you don't have faith, then you can't please God. And I would say that the implication of this is that God is pleased by our faith. Like what God wants from us more than anything is for us to trust him. And that means that when we come to God, we believe that he's there, that he's real even though we can't see him, that he's inviting us into something, and that he has something good for us as we learn to trust him. Romans 14:23 ends by saying, if something is not from faith, then that is sin. And that's a really helpful, simple verse for us to cling to when we think about what God is inviting us to live out, that everything he wants for us is about faith. And if we're doing something and it's not really about trusting God, then that is sin. But then there's some positive things that Scripture says about faith. Like Habakkuk 2:4, we just read a quotation from that the righteous one will live by faith. And just really quickly, the word tzadek in Hebrew, the word righteousness in Hebrew, is not simply about doing the right thing. It's about being right with God and right with other people, which is about doing the right thing, but because of my desire to have a right relationship with God and a right relationship with other people. And so what we're reading here is that the people who want to be right with God and the people who want to be right with the world around them, with the people of God, that they are learning to walk by faith, to trust God and see what he does. But this is my favorite. Like, this is a North Star for me. Galatians 5:6. The only thing that counts, the only thing that matters is faith expressing itself in love. What are we being called to do as a church, as the people of God? To respond by God in faith and always as an expression of love as defined in Jesus Christ in his death, burial, and resurrection. Like that's what love looks like. And so the faith that we're living out looks like that. And then there's this hallmark verse, this is the essence of our faith, of what we believe. For by grace you have been saved. And this is not from yourself. Through faith, this is not from yourself, it's the gift of God. Are we being told here that faith is a gift from God or grace is a gift from God? Yeah. All of it is about God from beginning to end. It's what he's doing. He's inviting us to respond to something. In fact, that's what we see as we kind of trace out these characters in the book of Hebrews. Like verse 7, Noah, when he was warned about the things that he had not yet seen, drawing on that theme of like not being able to see what's ahead. He could not yet see. In holy fear, he built an ark to save his family. By faith, he condemned the world and became the heir of righteousness that comes by faith, just like what we read about in the previous verse. And by faith, Abraham, when he was called to go to a place that he would later receive as an inheritance, he obeyed and he went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, and so did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of that same promise. For he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder was God. So here's what we see in these few verses and in the book of Genesis. These heroes of faith, these people that we read about in the book of Hebrews, this long list of people who trusted God for things that they could not see and for the things that he was inviting them to experience, that they were always responding to God's invitation. This was not their idea. In other words, this faith is not about doing the thing you want to do. It's about responding to the thing that God is inviting you to live out. We can kind of trace this idea of what God is calling us all to, like in the very beginning of the book of Genesis. By the way, I skipped over this at the beginning. The word Genesis means origins. It means the beginning. In Hebrew, the first word of the Hebrew Bible is Bereshit, which means in the beginning. And then the heading in the Greek Bible and the Latin Bible is basically Genesis. It means the beginning. And right there in the beginning, we read the whole point of the story. That God created the world, and he created humanity in his image. And then he said to them, be fruitful and multiply or increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and over every living creature that moves along the ground. And I know you read this and you think, well, how is that about like the point of life? But I think very often we misunderstand the invitation here. This is the beginning of the call that God has for humanity that begins to be developed throughout the book of Genesis. And here's the big idea here. God is calling us as human beings who are created in His image to partner with Him and to fill the earth with good and beautiful things, to give order and shape to chaos. And that's what the story is about. When things begin to go awry, when things get off track, God continues to look for people who will partner with Him and fill the earth with good and beautiful things in spite of the chaos around them, and that they will begin to give shape and order to things that have clearly gone awry. In the book of Genesis 1:28 is like a flower that begins to unfold for the rest of the story. It's fleshed out and it's built upon throughout the entire Bible. This is the human vocation. This is the human calling, that we would partner with God to fill the world with good and beautiful things as we join Him in His mission. But notice, it's not your mission. It's not my mission. It's not what I want to do. It's what He desires to do. And so this theme is traced out in these other characters, right? Genesis 9:1, after the flood and the rainbow and the ark, and this is a story that our kids are talking about today. God blessed Noah and his sons. This blessing that begins in chapter 1, God blessed the man and the woman and gave them this call, continues here. Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth with good and beautiful things. And then when He calls Abram, who later becomes Abraham, He says, I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. And all the people on the earth will be blessed through you. Join me in this mission to fill the earth with good and beautiful things, despite the fact that it is chaotic and not the way that it should be. And then as we continue reading, we read about Jacob. God says to him that all the people of the world will be blessed through you and your offspring. This covenant that I made with Abraham is being fulfilled, and you continue to walk by faith and trust me. Live out this mission with me. And then in the very end of the book of Genesis, when Joseph says to his brothers, what you intended for evil, God intended for good, and He is bringing about His purpose, the saving of many lives. This is the thread in the book of Genesis from beginning to end. And I'm getting a text message here from the sound booth about the time. It says, bring watermelons after church. 12, please. I'm sorry. Siri is not being very helpful here. Nope, what that should say is meet with the leaders after church, 12 p.m. 12 p. All right. Sorry for that little aside, that little silly skit. In the book of Genesis, when people get this call, it's not always clear what they're being invited to do. It's clear that God is inviting them to something, but like a bad autocorrect by Siri, the end result is not always clear, and sometimes it's misinterpreted. I love the book The Call by Os Guinness, where this is about the thing that you've been put on this earth to do. He says, if there is no caller, then there is no calling. There's only work. Which is to say, when we talk about the idea of a calling, like a thing that we are here in the world to accomplish, our mission in life, it implies that there's someone who is calling you to that thing. Like this language is such that you're being invited to something that you don't quite understand and you're trying to figure it out. And if there's no purpose, and if there's no caller, then all we have is aimless work. And why are we doing it? That's what the book of Proverbs says. I want you to know this morning that the thing that you were put on this earth to do is going to be some specific iteration of you continuing to live out the blessing that God gave to Abraham, is traced out through Jesus and into the book of Revelation, that all of us are being called to fill the world with good and beautiful things in partnership with God. But in order to live that calling out, we have to tune in to the caller. We have to pay attention to his word. We have to surround ourselves with the people of God who are being led by the Spirit, and sometimes will say things to people like, you know what I see in you? And you know what I believe that God is calling you to do? Or the people who are praying with you that you might discover that thing more clearly. Look, there is someone who is calling you to something. And I just want to ask, are we paying attention to that? Because this is not our thing. No, it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourself. It is the gift of God. Not just your salvation in Jesus Christ, yes, primarily that, but everything that you're put in this world to experience and to live out. We back up just a little bit in the book of Genesis. We trace out this theme. We would see that the heroes of faith that we're reading about in the book of Hebrews chapter 11 and in the book of Genesis, that the thing that they are being called to live out is always experienced as they say yes to something that they don't fully understand. Like Abram's given a picture. Hey, leave your homeland and go to the place that I'm calling you to, and I'm going to bless you. And he's like, that's a great idea. I love it. He says yes. But he doesn't know how it's all going to unfold. In fact, very soon, as we continue to read through the story, it becomes clear that though Abraham obeyed and went to the place that he would later receive as an inheritance, he did not know where he was going. He didn't see the whole picture. And when he gets there, there's a famine in the land. And most Bible scholars would say, like, this is a test for Abram. Will you stay in the place that God has called you to? Will you stay there and wait to see what he is doing? Or are you going to leave? And he does leave. He goes to Egypt. And he lies about his wife and says his wife is his sister. So Pharaoh takes her as his bride and makes her part of his harem and almost jeopardizes the entire plan that God has for Abram and Sarai. But God is gracious to Abram. And he says, I know you don't get it yet. I'll protect you. I'll continue to bless you, even though you keep getting off track. But it all starts with a yes. It all starts with Abram saying, God, whatever you want from me, I believe that you're good and you have something good for me. Shonda Rhimes is the writer of many of your favorite shows on television. Her production company is Shondaland. She first made a name for herself with Grey's Anatomy and has since had like 12 or 13 different hit shows. She has a TED Talk that came out in 2016 called Say Yes, in which she, in the year of the previous year, had devoted her life just to saying yes to things that were hard and yes to things that were scary. And like even though she wanted to say no, like just start saying yes. And I think that for you and I, our journey of faith looks kind of like that, but a little different. In that, we're not just saying yes to anything. We're saying yes to those things that are clearly an invitation from God to step into something that is unknown. To step into something that might be a little bit bigger than we would have expected that we would do with our lives. To step into something that might be a little bit scary. To respond to God's invitation to this journey of faith. I'm not a big fan of reality TV. I don't like how when they come to a commercial break, they do a thing, and then you come back from the commercial break, and they do that same thing. They just recap the whole thing. But I do like the idea of working together with a team to accomplish a goal. I love The Amazing Race, like the way that they tackle these projects together. And in every episode, there is an invitation to something that the team is to live out together. And now you can play this game at home. In fact, the Amazing Race Home Edition comes with a set of envelopes. And in that envelope, you tear open the envelope and you have to do the activity together. And I think our journey of faith is a lot like that. That very often, God is inviting us to say, yes, I'm willing to open the envelope. I'm willing to move forward in this thing. I don't know what it's calling me to exactly. But I believe that you are good and that you have something for me. These heroes of faith respond to God's invitation and say yes, even though they don't know the outcome. And they choose to trust God when it would be easier to do something else. This is the story of the book of Genesis. Like every character in the book of Genesis, though they get off track, though they have a hard time, though they are clearly imperfect, they continue to choose the harder thing. Like Jacob, who had a falling out with his brother, Jacob's name, by the way, means that he's a little bit deceitful and sneaky about the way that he goes about things. And he has some tension with his brother, but he is to receive, but his brother Esau is the older and to receive the blessing from their father Isaac. And when Esau sells his birthright, the writer of Hebrews says that he did that and it was a faithless act. Jacob becomes the recipient of the blessing that we've been reading about in the book of Genesis. And so he goes to a distant land, marries a wife, and is estranged from his brother. And then on the way back home, he encounters his brother, and he sends gifts ahead of him. And they have this moment where they reconcile. And I imagine that if you've ever experienced relational estrangement from someone in your family, like that moment of reconciliation is intimidating. It's overwhelming. And it's clearly the case for Jacob as he approaches his brother Esau. But I wonder if in your life, God is inviting you, or inviting me, to have that same kind of reconciliation with people with whom you've had a falling out. And we talked about here recently at Sweetwater that the Apostle Paul calls us to peace as far as it is possible, as far as it depends on you. And sometimes it can't be worked out, and not because of you, but because of the other person. But is there something hard or scary like that God is calling you to? I think very often we are under the impression that if God is leading us forward, the path is going to be easy. And I just want you to know, nothing could be further from the truth. If you've experienced loss, it requires tremendous faith to hold on to hope as you move forward. If you work in an environment that feels toxic, it requires tremendous faith to continue to be a light in that dark place. There are so many things that you will encounter just as you leave here and go home, or as you begin the week, that are going to require you to respond to the situation around you as an act of faith and do the right thing even though it's hard. So, like I said, Tammy and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary this week. And just as the Lord would orchestrate things, we also visited my father in the hospital. He had a lot of tests done this past week and is having some medical issues. And so we just had a time where we couldn't do anything else but sit and talk. And so we did for like 3 hours. And we learned a lot about my family history, my dad's family. And just what a crazy series of events and the way everything kind of weaved together, like just so much dysfunction that somehow didn't keep people from continuing to be successful as they move forward. One of the things my dad said in that conversation was that, yeah, as you think about it, divorce is just part of the story. Every generation has experienced divorce. In fact, you might be the only one in our family who's not divorced. Wait, there's one other one, but that's it. And I say that just to say that these 25 years have not been easy. The only reason that Tammy and I are still together after 25 years is that we are choosing to trust God when it's hard. And work through things that we believe that God is calling us to work through together. And to not give up. And it's not just about wanting to have a good life. It's about trusting God that He's at work in the middle of all of it. As Buddy will say to anyone who goes through premarital counseling with him, marriage is a three-legged stool. It's you and your spouse and God. You can't have a marriage without any of those, or without one of those. My kids and I went on a hike several years ago. They're going to be embarrassed for just a second as I put this picture up there. And I will take it away very quickly for them. The hike was hard. It was an arduous journey. They didn't know what they were in for. I kind of knew. It really wasn't that bad or that scary, but for them it was all unknown. And one of my favorite places to hike is the Ocala National Forest, and so we went to Juniper Springs and we set out there and we went north to Salt Springs. We made our way around Hopkins Prairie, and it was very hot that day. And when we got off that very hot section of the trail and into some shaded area, we decided this is good enough. We're going to stop for a break. And so we did, and we made dinner, and we set up our tents. And then we realized we were out of water, which is kind of a big deal in Florida, at a hot section of the trail. And the next morning, we woke up like with a plan. Like, we're going to hike back to a little pond that was not a pretty body of water. There's a lot of algae around it, and it was difficult to get down into. And so we did. We went down into that water, and we started filtering out the water through a filter that I had, and the filter broke. And we said, well, what are we going to do now? And so we began filtering water through a sock. It was a used sock to get out the big debris, and then we used a life straw that my kids got me for Christmas the year before. And we sucked that, we shared that life straw and sucked that sock-filtered water through that straw. And then we got a little lost, and we weren't sure where we were going, and it was just a long day. And along the way, we had to come up with games. And I thought, what a great time to teach my kids one of my favorite memory verses. Hebrews 11:6. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him earnestly. And it went like this. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. He is pleased by faith, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and rewards those who seek him earnestly, rewards those who seek him. And they still remember this song. It was a hard journey. And we needed to remember that every step along the way is an act of faith, trusting that God is with us. And I think that's the last idea that I want us to hone in on this morning as we wrap up. That you will get it wrong sometimes. That we will get off track. If anything is clear in the book of Genesis, it's that God continues to pick people who are pretty good but still pretty flawed. And they don't always perceive what he is calling them to do. And even when they do, sometimes they forget. Or they act as though they don't remember. But you need to know that even when you get off track, God is with you, always calling you back, always inviting you back to join him in this mission, to fill the world with good and beautiful things. Even so, Joseph, at the end of his life, when he was near the end, he spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instruction concerning the burial of his bones. In other words, I know that we're in Egypt and we're not in the promised land, but God is not done yet. He's going to finish the story because he is with us. He is faithful. And Joseph says to his brothers at the end of the book of Genesis, so don't be afraid. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Though you betrayed me, God used this to preserve our people, and he will finish the story. The Apostle Paul says to his friend Timothy that though you are faithless, that though we are sometimes faithless, God remains faithful. Though we lose our way, God continues to invite us back. Because the promise is not dependent on you. It's dependent on him, and he cannot disown himself. He cannot deny the promise that he has made. He is faithful, and he continues to call you to trust him. So my friends are going back to school this week. And as they do, we have this tag for them on their backpack. And this tag says that your church family is praying with you as you return to school in 2025. And there's a verse there from the book of Joshua. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I have a friend, or not a friend, somebody that I've met a couple times in life. Her name is Kay Mall. She is known in some ladies' circles as being a woman who speaks at women's conferences and is a champion of children's ministry. And she spoke at a ladies' conference that my wife attended and some ladies from the church where I was serving in the Florida Panhandle a long time ago. And I was just blown away at this moment where she's sharing her story about how she, after being married for 8 months, lost her husband in a car accident and could not consider what it meant for her to continue moving forward, and it was overwhelming for her. And she talked about the way that Scripture became just like an anchor for her, that she kept coming back to the things that God said. What is He calling me to live out? And like that became the thing that kept her steady in life. And so she said, I want to give you an example. And she began to recite word for word Hebrews chapter 11, the entire chapter from beginning to end. These people all walked by faith, believing that God was calling them to something that they couldn't understand, that there was something that He had in store for them, that He earnestly rewards those who seek Him. He was faithful, and He did not give up. These people, though the world was not worthy of them, they were persecuted and sawed in half, the writer says. They walked by faith. And they trusted that there was a God who had prepared a place for them. There was a city whose architect and builder was God. And that the story was not over yet. And so that they, together with us, would receive this promise. So, friends, in the month of August, our children and our students are reading through the book of Genesis. And we invite you back to family night on the 20th. And we'll continue to explore this theme together. But I want you to know, this is not just a Bible story. This is not just something we tell the kids. This is very adult stuff. May we be a people who recognize that God is calling us to join Him in His mission, to fill the world with good and beautiful things, not because we are accomplishing our own plan, but because we are learning to trust Him, that He has a plan, and that He wants us to partner with Him.